Hello everyone, my name is Dean and welcome back to another Ruby on Rails tutorial. Today we're going to be taking a look at creating usernames in Devise. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create some fake stubbed out usernames real quick. This will take maybe 2 minutes. And this is just so that we can, demo our application without having to create the entire login portion of Devise. So this is something that I frequently do when I'm first starting out and I don't feel like changing all the Devise forms. I just quickly split the email and I call that the username. And that just lets me see, in my nav bar, does it look okay to have a username? Or like on the section in the page, does it look okay to have a username? As opposed to having the whole email there, because those might be longer than what I would expect. So that's the first thing we're going to take a look at, and then we're going to follow the Devise instructions for how you actually create a username that you can log in with. So this will allow you to log in with both your username and your email, and it'll make sure that a user can't set their username to be someone else's email address. So we're going to take a look at both of those, and then we'll have a fully functional login system by the time we're done. So let's go ahead and let's jump into some code. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is create the stubbed out version of a username. So this one you won't be able to sign in with. But it's a really quick way to demo having a username in your application if you just need to see what it looks like. So let's start by generating a controller. So we'll say railsg controller pages home, and this is just so we have a home page to visit. And while that's running, we can come into our gem file and we can add in the Devise gem. So I'm just going to come down here and say gem Devise, and I'll save that. And then we can run a bundle command in our terminal. And then we can run the Devise installer. So we can say railsg devise :install. And then after the Devise installer runs, we can run a railsg devise user. And now that we have our user created, we can come into our views, pages, home.html, and we can just say if current_user. Then we'll just do a link to sign out, and then we'll say destroy user session path, and then the method is going to be delete. Else we'll link to a sign up page, which is going to be the new user registration path. Then we'll do a link to the sign in page. This is going to be the new user session path. And then we can just say end. So we'll save all that. We'll run a in our terminal, we'll run a rails db:/migrate command to migrate the database. And then once that's done, we can use rails s to start the server. And then we can come up here and just go to localhost port 3000. And we should come to /pages/home for right now because we haven't set the home page as our root path. And Webpacker will compile, and then this should work. So let's hit sign up. We'll say dean@example.com with a password of password. And let's change this so that we go to the root path because this is already getting on my nerves. So we can come into our config routes file and we'll change this get to be root, and we'll just change this / to a hash. And then if we refresh after this finally saves, it'll take us to the home page. So there you can see it says sign out. So let's change this h1 up here to be the let's say current user.email. So if we do this, you can see here it's the dean@example.com. Now, of course, you should probably put this under the, we can move this in here maybe. So if current user, do that, and we'll just get rid of this. So we're just doing this to demo the application. We're not doing it because it makes sense. Normally you wouldn't just throw everything inside of one if statement like this, but in here we'll just say if you're not signed in, you should sign in. So now if I sign out, it'll tell us to sign in. So we can hit sign in, dean@example.com, and that works just fine. Okay, so let's get rid of this Dean at example.com and just replace it with a Dean so that we have a way to like demo our application. Because maybe we need to see what it looks like to have a username here instead of an email because we're trying to format it for usernames and not emails. And we don't feel like going through the whole Devise username setup. So the fastest way to do this, you could do it right here. It's a little bit cleaner if you do it in like a helper or in your user.rb file. I usually just do this in my user.rb file. Not because it wouldn't make sense in a helper, but because I get rid of it so fast that when I'm cleaning up my Devise code, I usually come in here anyways, and then when I do, I can just delete it. But you could just as easily put this inside of like a helper method. So all we're going to do in here is we're just going to return the self.email.split. We're going to split it at the @ symbol. We're going to grab the first element and then call capitalize. So whenever we call current user.email or current user.username, it's going to come in here. It's going to grab the email. So in this case, the email is equal to dean@example.com. It's then going to split this. Let me just full screen this so you guys can see this. It's going to split this email. So it's going to split at the @ symbol right here. So you're going to have an array where the first element is going to be Dean. And the second element, if I just, actually let me save this just so that we can see this happen. So let me punch this back out. Let's come into our home page and I'll just call current user.username. So I'm going to use the first element here, which will grab Dean, and it'll capitalize it. And I'm going to grab the second element. There we go. So you can see here it's not including this @ symbol when I do that. So it grabs the email and it's like removes this @ symbol, and that's where it splits it at. So the second is example.com. And then you're grabbing the 0th element normally. So we take this element or this array with 2 elements and we grab the 0th element of that array, which is equal to Dean in this case. And then we call .capitalize on it, which is going to return Dean. So we basically split the entire string, grab the part of the email that will look most like a username, and then we capitalize it. And by doing that, as soon as this saves and refreshing, it gives us something that looks vaguely like a username. But you can do a bit better because you can't log in with this. So if you want to log in using a username and you go to Google, you can look for like Devise username login. And there should be, the first result right here. So this is off the Devise wiki. And we'll just go ahead and we'll walk through this. I'll try and zoom in as much as possible. So the first thing we need to do is generate a migration. So let's kill the server and we'll run Rails G migration. Rails G migration. And then we'll run a migration. So we'll say Rails G migration, add username to users, and the username is a string that is unique. So now we have that, we can run our Rails db:/migrate command to migrate the database again. And now we need to follow some of these steps. So the first one is the application controller. So we'll come into our controllers, application controller. And in here, they want us to include a before action to configure the permitted parameters if the Devise controller. So here we're just basically going to override what the default parameters are that are permitted. Because we want to add in the username to be a permitted parameter. So you could copy this whole thing right here. I'm going to try and type through it. I don't know if that's going to take too much time though. So we'll see. I might edit this in post and just make it look like I copied it. But we're going to start by adding in the username, the email, the password confirmation, and then whatever this last one is, which is the remember me. Okay, so we add in those attributes, and now we need to basically set these as keys for the sign up and the account update page. So we'll start with the sign up page. So we'll say devise parameter sanitizer.permit for the sign up page. Keys should be the added attributes that we just created. And then the same thing. So I'll just copy this, paste it down here, .permit for the account update. The keys will be the added attributes. And then I'll save this. So you can see here what we did. And my formatter changes this to a %i, which gets rid of the colons and the commas. But the rest of this looks basically the same. So next we have to create this login virtual attribute in the user model. So we come into the user model, and here you can already see the username. So you're already thinking to yourself, if you had done this, oh, right, I need to get rid of this. Otherwise, things won't work as I expect them to, because you'll be calling two different versions of the username. So we'll just start by creating this attr writer for the login. And then we'll do a def login end. And then, oops, inside here we'll say @login or self.username or self.email. Save that. Now we have to come into the config initializers devise.rb. So let me just move this over properly. So config initializers devise.rb. And in here we have to change the authentication keys. So if we do a Control F and just type in authentication keys, you can see right here it's commented out. So we'll uncomment that and we'll change this email to a login, and we'll save that. And here it's telling you that if you have multiple models with Devise, which we don't, you can also add it into the user model at the end here. But we only have one, so we don't need to do that. We also don't need permissions. We do need to override the find for database authentication. So let's grab this piece of code right here, and let's add this into our user model. So we'll come into our user model, and we'll just say def self.find for database authentication warden conditions end. And then in here we'll say conditions are equal to the warden conditions.dupe. And then if login is equal to conditions.delete the login, else end, and this is just so I remember to close it, I will say where the conditions.toHash.where lowercase username is equal to value, or lower, I'm assuming this is going to be email, is equal to value. And then I don't know if there's something else here. There is. So after the email, but inside of the square bracket, we're going to do a comma, open brace, value is login.downCase, and then we come outside of all three of these and then say .first. Then we have this else if right here. So we're going to change this else to an else if. Conditions.has underscore key question mark, and then username or conditions.has key email. And I think that's it, right? Yep. Okay. So now we can come down here and we can just say where conditions.toH.first. And that's it for updating our user model. If you want the email to be case insensitive, you can add in this conditions email.downCase if conditions email. So that allows you to add the case insensitivity. You can also do that to the username. So if you come into your user, you can say validates username, presence true, uniqueness, case sensitive is false. You could also change the find conditions if you prefer to do it that way. So you would find the lowercase username, but here it's telling you that there's an error with this. And the error is just if we were to come in here and we have the dean@example.com, the server's not running. But basically if I create my account with dean@example.com as my email and someone else creates a account with the username dean@example.com, you would have an email and a username that are the same. And then how does it decide which one to use? And I think right here it's going to go through it. Yeah, so basically you want to create this like validate username method. So we'll just do that right now. We'll just say validate username. So it's saying validate and then this method, and then we have to actually create that. So we'll come down here and we'll just say def validate username and then in here we'll just say if user.where email is equal to the username dot exists, then errors dot add username is invalid. And I'm leaving this username right here that we created earlier just so you can see what it looks like if you do have something like this hidden in your application, which is why I try to make it as obvious as possible where it is. So we're not using Mongo, and then we have to update our views. So the last step is going to be to do our Rails G devise :views to create our views. And then we can come into, we don't have scoped views, but we have to modify the two that we changed in here, right? So in our application controller, we changed the sign up page and the edit account page. So we need to come into our new sessions path and our registrations new path. So let's do our sessions first. So we'll come into views, devise, sessions new. So if we're trying to log into our sessions, we don't need an email anymore, but we do need our login field, which is what we called it. Oops. So we'll change that to a login, and we'll change this to a login, but this isn't an email field anymore. This is now a text field. It can still be an autofocus, and there is no autocomplete here. You could change, I guess, the autocomplete to a username. But for right now, we'll just leave that blank and we'll save this. And then in our registrations new, we have to change that one. So in our new registration, we now have an additional field that is going to be the autofocus when you start up. So we'll just say this is a div with a class of field. So I'll tab that over. And then in here, I'll say f.label the username. And here we're using the username because it is the distinct entity that is not a combination of the username and the email, which is the login. So in our sessions, we use the login because it's either your email or your username. Here it is precisely your username that we are creating inside of the new user registration path. So when you click sign up, you have to put in both your username and your email. You're not just putting in your login. So here we'll say f.text field for the username, and that works for our new registration. But then in our edit, we need to come in here, and actually let me come into our new again because I forgot to do this. We want to change the autofocus from the email right here. So we'll cut that out and we'll paste this to the username so that it starts off focusing the topmost field, which is the username. So we'll just save that. Then we can come into our edit. And above the email, we can just say div with a class equal, well, I guess I can do it this way, class equal to field. And then I'll close off this div. And then in here, we just want a f.label for the username. And then we need a f.text field for the username. And then we can save this. And now you can change it so that your users can recover their password or confirm their accounts. And this is just going to have a couple extra steps for this. I'm not covering password resetting in this tutorial because I'd probably want to cover how to actually demo a fake email system in your project for this. But for right now, this should be good enough. So let's run a Rails db:/migrate command just in case we haven't yet. And then once that's done, we can run a Rails S to start the server again. So hopefully this runs, and then we'll do a Rails S to start the server. Looks like we already did the migration because I didn't see anything being created there, so we're good. So now let me sign out. I'll sign in. And here we're already running into an issue. So it's trying to call the username method inside of our new user session path from our user model. And it's not throwing an error with the username anymore. Now it's going to show you this error like, oh yeah, you're trying to capitalize the email or whatever. And you're not, because you're not logged in, so that doesn't make any sense. But in our new user session path, we have this thing that's like, do a username. So it's like, it's getting a little bit confused. And that's where, if you like have this in a helper, it might be a little like off for where is this being called. This way you just come into your user model and hopefully you'll notice that you still have this username thing. So if we just delete this, we'll save it. And then I'll come in here and I'll refresh the page. We can now log in. So if we, oops, well, this just got changed. So if I try to log in with dean@example.com, there's no username up here. Why is that? Well, if I kill the server and type Rails C, and now I look for user.first, which is going to be my email account, you can see here that we have the email, but the username is nil. So it's trying to change that. So what we can do is we can just say user.first.update, and we want to update the username, and we'll change this to Deanin, just so that we can confirm this is working. And now I'll do a Control D to exit and a Rails S to start the server. And then I'll come up here and refresh the page. And now you can see that we have our username here. So we can also come into, I think it's /users/edit. And this will be our, our registration path. So I do need to fix this. This is going to be in our Devise edit registrations. So this is a new registration. This is the edit one. And let me fix this capital T. So I'll save that and I'll refresh the page. And in here, you can see we can change our username. So let's just change this to like Dean out or Dino, because apparently Chrome is crashing. Okay, so Chrome just crashed on me. So we can come in here and we can change this to Dean out. And then we do need to enter our current password to update our account. And you can see here that we now have our Dean out username here. So let's just go back one more time and we'll change this to be like, I don't know, dry paint. We'll update this, and now it's changed to dry paint as the username. So now let's try to sign in with dry paint, and there you go. Let's also try to sign in with dean@example.com. Okay, so Chrome just crashed on me again, so now we're in Firefox. So we're going to try to log in with dean@example.com with a password. I'll click login, and it'll log us in with that email, and the proper username will still be there. So that basically does it for this tutorial. You now have a functioning username. You got rid of our fake username, but you also see how you can prototype it if you don't want to go through these steps every time. Okay, so that's going to do it for this short little tutorial on creating a Devise username. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. If this video helped you, remember to like it. And if it didn't help you, remember to dislike it, because that helps out everyone else, because they see it's a bad tutorial and then they don't need to watch it. We don't need more bad tutorials at the top of the search results on YouTube. I think we've all been subjected to enough of those. So you're helping out everyone by doing that. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good day.